Some believe success is the ultimate form of revenge, but this story takes it a step further. 5 years ago, Christopher Smith threw his pregnant wife out on the street in the dead of winter, claiming she was bad for his image. Today, as he prepares to marry a billionaire's daughter, he made a cruel calculation. He invited his poor ex-wife just to humiliate her one last time. He wanted her to cry in the back row. But Christopher made a fatal mistake. He didn't know that the woman he left behind didn't just survive. She conquered, and she isn't coming alone. When that limousine door opens, the silence will be deafening. This is the story of how a shamed ex-wife turned a royal wedding into a royal takedown. The envelope was heavy. It wasn't the kind of paper you picked up at a local drugstore. It was cream-colored cardstock, textured like linen, with calligraphy so sharp it looked like it could cut skin. Sarah Mitchell stood in the foyer of her penthouse in downtown Seattle, the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the Space Needle. She held the envelope with a manicured hand, her thumb brushing over the return address. The Smith Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. The grapevine in high society was faster than fiber-optic internet, and although Sarah had kept her identity carefully guarded for the last 5 years, she kept tabs on him. Christopher Smith, the man who had promised to love her until death, only to choose money over loyalty. "Mum, who's that from?" Sarah turned. Standing in the hallway, holding a toy drone, was Austin. Behind him, peeking around the corner, were his brother Connor and their sister, Bella. They were 5 years old, possessing the same piercing blue eyes as their father, but with the softness and resilience of their mother. "It's just some junk mail, sweetie," Sarah lied smoothly, sliding the envelope onto the marble console table. "Why don't you 3 go ask Nanny Margaret to help you set up the runway for the drone?" "Okay," the triplets chorused, their little feet thumping against the hardwood as they scrambled away. Once they were gone, Sarah's smile vanished. She picked up a silver letter opener and sliced the seal. Inside lay the invitation, embossed in gold foil. "Mr. Christopher Smith and Miss Beatrice Vanderkamp request the honor of your presence." It was a wedding invitation. But it wasn't just an invitation, it was a weapon. Tucked inside the RSVP card was a handwritten note. Christopher's handwriting. Spiky, arrogant, rushed. "Sarah, I know things ended badly, and I assume things are still difficult for you. I wanted to extend an olive branch. Come see what true success looks like. Beatrice is wonderful, and I think it would be good for you to see that I've finally found someone who fits my world. I'll even cover your bus ticket if you need it. For old time's sake." Chris Sarah stared at the words. Bus ticket. The audacity stole the breath from her lungs. It transported her back 5 years to that freezing night in Chicago. She remembered the smell of Christopher's scotch as he stood by the fireplace in their small, drafty apartment. He had just landed a junior executive role at Smith Holloway, his family's estranged firm. He was climbing the ladder, and he had decided his rungs were too slippery to carry a wife who worked as a waitress. "It's just not working, Sarah," he had said, not even looking at her. "I'm going places. You're happy with coupons and leftovers. I need a partner who understands the corporate world, not someone who smells like diner grease." "I'm pregnant, Chris," she had whispered, the test still burning a hole in her pocket. She hadn't told him yet. She wanted it to be a surprise. He had laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Don't lie to keep me here, Sarah. It's pathetic. Even if you are, I don't want it. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. Pack your bags. I want you out by noon." He didn't know it was triplets. He didn't wait long enough to find out. He threw her out into a snowstorm with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. For the first 6 months, she lived in a shelter. She scrubbed floors. She barely ate so that she could afford prenatal vitamins. But Sarah had a brain that Christopher had always underestimated. While he saw a waitress, he missed the fact that she spent her nights coding on a second-hand laptop. She developed an algorithm for supply chain logistics, Logiflow. It started small, a tool for local trucking companies. Then, a tech giant caught wind of it. 2 years after the divorce, Sarah sold the software patent for $42 million. She didn't stop there. She invested. She built Mitchell Holdings. She bought real estate. She became the silent owner of the very luxury hotel chain Christopher often stayed at. But she kept her name out of the press. She used proxies. To the world, Sarah Mitchell was a ghost. To Christopher Smith, she was a memory of poverty. And now, he was offering her a bus ticket. Sarah walked over to the window, her reflection staring back. She wasn't the frazzled, terrified girl in the oversized coat anymore. She was wearing a silk blouse that cost more than Christopher's first car. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "This is Roberts," a crisp British voice answered. "Roberts, it's Sarah," she said, her voice steady and cold. "Clear my schedule for the weekend of the 24th, and prepare the jet. We're going to Connecticut." "Very good, ma'am. Shall I book accommodations?" "No," Sarah said, a dark smile playing on her lips. "Buy the venue. I believe the wedding is at the Harrington estate?" "It is." "Buy it. Anonymous LLC. Triple the asking price if you have to. I want to own the ground he walks on before he even says, 'I do.'" "Consider it done. And the children?" Sarah looked down the hall where the triplets were laughing. "They're coming too. It's time they met their father. And it's time Christopher met the consequences of his actions. Greenwich, Connecticut, is a place where money doesn't just talk. It whispers, because it knows everyone is already listening. The Harrington estate was the jewel of the town, a sprawling 1920s mansion with manicured gardens, a private lake, and a ballroom that had hosted presidents and royalty. Christopher Smith stood on the terrace, swirling a glass of 18-year-old whiskey. He looked impeccable in his custom Armani tuxedo, the fabric hugging his broad shoulders. At 32, he had everything he had ever chased. He was the VP of Smith Holloway, he drove a McLaren, and tomorrow he was marrying Beatrice Vanderkamp. Beatrice was the daughter of an oil tycoon. She was beautiful in a sharp, angular way, like a diamond that could cut glass. She was also demanding, shallow, and obsessed with status, exactly what Christopher thought a wife should be. "Chris, darling." Beatrice's voice pierced his thoughts. She fluttered onto the terrace, clutching a seating chart. "We have a crisis. The senator's wife can't sit next to the count from Italy. Apparently, there's bad blood over a vineyard purchase." Christopher sighed, feigning interest. "Just move the count to table 4, babe. Put him with the investors from Tokyo." "You're a genius," she cooed, kissing his cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. "By the way, did you get any weird RSVPs? My assistant said we had a confirmation from a guest +3, but no name was listed on the digital registry. Just a barcode." Christopher frowned. "Probably a glitch in the system, or maybe it's your Uncle Al trying to sneak in his new girlfriends." He laughed, but a tiny knot formed in his stomach. He thought of the letter he sent Sarah. He hadn't actually expected her to come. He sent it to be cruel, to get a kick out of the idea of her reading it in some trailer park, crying over her mistakes. "I actually invited my ex-wife," Christopher said, taking a sip of his drink. Beatrice froze. "You did what?" "Why?" "Relax, Bea. She's a nobody. A waitress I made the mistake of marrying fresh out of college. I invited her to show her what real class looks like. She won't come. She probably can't afford the flight, let alone a dress suitable for this." Beatrice smirked, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, I see. A little victory lap? I like that. If she does show up, we can have security sit her in the back, behind the floral arrangements. The staff table, perhaps." "Perfect," Christopher chuckled. She was always complaining about money. Maybe she'll try to take some of the lobster home in her purse. They both laughed, the sound echoing over the estate grounds. They had no idea that the staff table wasn't going to be necessary. Inside the estate manager's office, just 100 yards away, the general manager, Mr. Henderson, was sweating profusely. He was on the phone. "Yes, Ms. Mitchell." "Yes, I understand," Henderson stammered, wiping his forehead. "The ownership transfer was finalized an hour ago. You are technically... Yes, you are the owner of the Harrington estate. We will follow your instructions to the letter." Henderson listened for a moment, his face paling. "You want us to do what with the groom's car?" He paused, swallowing hard. "Understood, ma'am. And regarding your entrance, yes. We will keep the main gates closed until the exact moment you specify. The ceremony starts at 4:10 p.m. 4:15 p.m., Sarah's voice came through the line, crisp and authoritative. "Let the bride walk down the aisle. Let them get to the speak now or forever, hold your peace part. That is when I arrive." "Very good, Miss Mitchell." Henderson hung up the phone and looked out the window at Christopher, who was still laughing on the terrace. The manager shook his head. He had seen many weddings in his time, lots of drama, drunken uncles and cold feet, but he had never seen a storm like the one approaching. The next morning, the day of the wedding, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The parking lot began to fill with Bentleys, Rolls-Royces and Ferraris. The elite of the East Coast poured onto the lawn, women in designer gowns and men in tails. Christopher was in the groom's suite, adjusting his cufflinks. His best man, a slick stockbroker named Greg, poured him a shot. "To the trophy wife," Greg toasted. "To the merger," Christopher corrected with a wink. Marrying Beatrice was going to merge his family's firm with the Vanderkamp oil empire. It was a billion-dollar union. Love was secondary. This was business. "Hey, did that ex of yours show up?" Greg asked. "Haven't seen her." Christopher checked his Rolex. "It's 3:50. If she came, she probably snuck in the back. I told security to keep an eye out for a woman looking out of place. You know, cheap dress, desperate eyes." "Savage, man," Greg laughed. At 4:10 p.m., the music began. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. The guests took their seats on white wooden chairs arranged on the south lawn. The altar was a magnificent arch of white roses and hydrangeas. Christopher stood at the altar, looking every bit the prince of the city. He watched Beatrice walk down the aisle. She wore a Vera Wang gown that cost $50,000. She looked stunning, though her smile was tight, focused more on the cameras covering the event for Vogue Society than on her future husband. The ceremony began. The officiant, a local judge, began the standard speech about love and commitment. Christopher zoned out, scanning the back rows. "Where are you, Sarah?" he thought. "I want you to see this." He couldn't find her. He felt a pang of disappointment. He wanted the satisfaction of her envy. She probably couldn't afford the bus ticket after all, he told himself. "If there is anyone here present," the judge's voice boomed, echoing off the stone walls of the estate, "who knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever, hold your peace." The silence was standard. Usually, people shifted in their seats or coughed. But this time, the silence was broken by the low, guttural rumble of an engine. Not a car engine. A convoy. Heads turned. The heavy iron gates at the top of the long, winding driveway, gates that were supposed to be locked, swung open slowly, controlled by the remote system. A black motorcycle escort, 4 of them, roared in first, their lights flashing. They flanked a vehicle that made the guests' Bentleys look like toys. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom stretched limousine, custom matte black with chrome accents. It was followed by 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind used by Secret Service or heads of state. The convoy rolled down the driveway, the gravel crunching loudly, interrupting the ceremony completely. Beatrice looked furious. "Who is that?" "Christopher. Who is crashing my wedding?" Christopher was frozen. I don't know. Maybe it's your father's surprise gift?" The convoy stopped right at the edge of the grass, just 20 feet from the altar. The music died. The guests whispered frantically. Is it the president? Is it a movie star? The driver of the Rolls-Royce, a man built like a tank in a fitted suit, stepped out. He walked around to the rear passenger door. The crowd held its breath. The door opened. First, a pair of heels hit the grass, not scuffed pumps from a discount store. These were Christian Louboutin, the soles as red as fresh blood, custom-studded with diamonds. Then, Sarah stepped out. Christopher's jaw unhinged. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her curves in a way that was both elegant and dangerous. Her hair, once usually tied back in a messy bun, cascaded in polished waves over her shoulders. She wore diamonds around her neck that caught the sunlight so fiercely it hurt to look at them. But it wasn't just the clothes, it was the aura. She radiated power. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like a queen coming to execute a traitor. A collective gasp went through the crowd, but the real shock came 3 seconds later. Sarah didn't walk toward the altar immediately. She turned back to the car and extended her hand. "Come on, my loves," she said, her voice carrying in the stunned silence. Out stepped a boy in a miniature tuxedo. Then another boy, identical to the first. And finally, a little girl in a midnight blue flower girl dress. 3 children. Triplets. They had Christopher's chin. They had Christopher's nose. And as they looked up at the man standing at the altar, they stared at him with Christopher's own ice-blue eyes. Sarah stood tall, her hand resting protectively on Austin's shoulder. She looked directly at Christopher, who was gripping the altar rail to keep from collapsing. "I believe," Sarah said, her voice calm, melodious, and terrifying, that the groom might have forgotten to mention a few prior engagements. The silence on the Harrington estate lawn was heavy, broken only by the sharp rustle of the wind through the old oak trees. 300 guests sat frozen, their necks craned, eyes bouncing between the panicked groom, the furious bride, and the regal woman standing at the foot of the aisle with 3 children who were undeniably Sterlings. Beatrice was the first to snap. The color rose in her cheeks, clashing with her pristine white veil. She snatched the microphone from the stunned judge's hand. "Security!" she shrieked, the feedback screeching through the speakers, causing guests to wince. "Get this woman out of here. She's crashing a private event. Someone grab those kids." 2 burly security guards in black suits, hired by the Vanderkamp family, took a step forward from the perimeter. But before they could reach Sarah, the driver of the Rolls-Royce, a man named Cale, who served as Sarah's head of personal security, stepped in front of her. He didn't raise a fist, he simply held up a hand. Simultaneously, 4 other men materialized from the crowd. They had been sitting in the back rows, dressed as guests. They stood up, buttoned their jackets, and formed a protective semicircle around Sarah and the triplets. They were armed, discreetly, but their posture screamed special forces. The Vanderkamp security guards hesitated, looking at each other. They were paid to bounce drunks, not engage a paramilitary unit. Sarah ignored the commotion completely. She squeezed Austin's hand gently and began to walk up the aisle. The guests, instinctively, pulled their feet back, parting like the Red Sea. Click, flash, click. A few younger guests, the influencers and socialites, couldn't help themselves. Phones came out. This was better than the wedding. This was a scandal in real time. Sarah stopped 3 feet from the altar steps. Up close, Christopher looked even more pale. He was sweating, his eyes darting from the triplets to Sarah's face. "Sarah," he choked out. "What? What is this? Who are they?" "Hello, Christopher," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the hush, it carried perfectly. She reached into her clutch, a diamond-encrusted Judith Lieber bag worth more than Christopher's annual salary, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She tossed it at his feet. "You sent me an invitation," she said coolly. "You wanted me to see what true success looks like. You offered me a bus ticket." Christopher looked down at the note lying on the white rose petals. I was joking," he stammered, his charm evaporating. "It was just closure." "Closure," Sarah repeated, tasting the word like sour wine. She looked at Beatrice, who was trembling with rage. "And you must be the upgrade, the one who fits his world." Beatrice sneered, finding her voice. "I am Beatrice Vanderkamp. My father owns half the oil rigs in Texas. You are just some trash from his past. I don't know who you rented that car from, or whose kids those are. But you need to leave. Now." Sarah laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh that unsettled everyone. "Rented?" Sarah looked back at the Rolls-Royce. "I don't rent, Beatrice. I acquire." She looked down at the triplets. "Austin, Connor, Bella. Say hello to your father." The 3 children looked at Christopher with curious, guarded eyes. They had been prepped for this. Mum had told them they were going to meet their dad, but that he wasn't a nice man. "Hi," Bella said, clutching her doll. "You look like Connor." Christopher felt the world spinning. "Triplets? But you said you were pregnant. You never said—" "You gave me 10 minutes to pack," Sarah cut him off, her voice turning to steel. "You threw me out in a blizzard. You didn't care if it was 1 baby or 3. You didn't care if we froze. You wanted your freedom to climb the corporate ladder." A murmur went through the crowd. The blizzard detail was new to them. Christopher had told everyone they had grown apart amicably. "That's a lie," Christopher shouted, trying to regain control of the narrative. "She's lying. She was cheating on me. That's why I kicked her out. The kids probably aren't even mine." The crowd gasped. It was a desperate, ugly defense. Sarah didn't flinch. She simply raised an eyebrow. "Is that the story you told them? That I was unfaithful?" "Interesting." She turned to the crowd, making eye contact with Christopher's mother, a stern woman named Eleanor Smith, who was sitting in the front row clutching her pearls. "Eleanor," Sarah said, nodding. "You always said I wasn't good enough because I didn't bring a dowry. I wonder, does a DNA test count as a dowry?" "Don't speak to my mother," Christopher yelled. He stepped down from the altar, his fists clenched. "Get out, Sarah. Take your brats, and get back to whatever gutter you crawled out of. I don't know how you got that dress, probably stole it or found a sugar daddy. But you don't belong here." "A sugar daddy?" Sarah smiled dangerously. "Christopher, look at the logistics. Look at the security. Look at the car. Do you really think a sugar daddy pays for this level of detail?" She took a step closer, invading his personal space. The scent of her perfume, a custom blend of jasmine and oud, filled his nostrils. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Chris. I came to accept your challenge. You wanted to compare successes? Let's compare. She gestured to the massive estate house behind them. You rented this venue for the day. It cost you what? 50,000. 70, Christopher spat. Not that you'd know what that kind of money looks like. 70,000, Sarah nodded. Cute. She pulled her phone out and tapped the screen once. The large digital screens that had been set up on either side of the altar to display a slideshow of Christopher and Beatrice suddenly went black. Then a logo appeared, a stylized M intertwined with a digital node network. Mitchell Holdings. A collective gasp rippled through the businessmen in the audience. Mitchell Holdings was a unicorn company, a venture capital firm that had disrupted the tech industry 3 years ago. The CEO was a ghost, never photographed, known only as S. Mitchell. I don't understand, Beatrice whispered, staring at the screen. You wouldn't, Sarah said. You inherited your money, Beatrice. I built mine. Sarah turned back to Christopher. I didn't rent the car. I own the fleet. I didn't find a sugar daddy. I became the sugar daddy. And as for this venue... She paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. I didn't like the way the staff treated me on the phone when I called to ask for directions, Sarah lied smoothly. So I bought the Harrington estate. As of 9 o'clock this morning, you are trespassing on my private property. The shockwave that hit the wedding party was almost physical. Mr. Henderson, the estate manager, stepped out from the side shadows, looking apologetic. He walked up to the altar, avoiding Christopher's gaze. Mr. Smith, Henderson said quietly, though the microphone caught it. I'm afraid she's correct. The ownership changed hands this morning. Ms. Mitchell is the new proprietor. You sold it? Christopher screamed, grabbing Henderson by the lapels. On my wedding day. She offered triple the market value, sir. It was an offer the board couldn't refuse, Henderson stammered, pulling away. Christopher released him, staggering back. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of horror and greed. The numbers were crunching in his head. If she could buy this estate on a whim, she was worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions, and they were technically still divorced, but there were kids. His kids. Beatrice, however, wasn't doing math. She was doing fury. I don't care if she bought the moon, Beatrice shrieked. This is my contract. We have a contract for the venue. Actually, Sarah interjected calmly, you have a contract with the previous management. There's a clause. Clause 14B regarding change of ownership. I invoked it. I can cancel any event with immediate effect if I deem it damaging to the property's reputation. And frankly, Christopher, she looked him up and down. Your suit is tacky. It's damaging the aesthetic. A few people in the back laughed. They couldn't help it. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that the groom was now the underdog in his own show. Christopher's mother, Eleanor, stood up. She walked over to Sarah, her eyes wide. She looked at the triplets. She saw the resemblance immediately. These were her grandchildren, her wealthy grandchildren. Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice trembling, trying to summon a fake warmth. My dear, we had no idea. If we had known about the children... Stop, Sarah said, holding up a hand. She didn't even look at the older woman. Don't try to rewrite history, Eleanor. You told Chris to leave me because I was a drain on resources. You don't get to claim my children now that they come with a trust fund. She turned back to Christopher. He was trying to compose himself. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic Sarah remembered well. Okay, Christopher said, exhaling loudly. Okay, Sarah, you made your point. You won. You're rich. Congratulations. You embarrassed me. Happy? Not yet, Sarah said, because there's one more thing you need to know. The invite said you wanted to show me true success at Smith Holloway. Christopher puffed out his chest slightly. Yes, I'm the VP. I'm taking the company global next year. About that, Sarah said, signaling to her bodyguard, Kyle. Kyle handed her a sleek black iPad. She tapped it and held it up. Do you know who the majority shareholder of Smith Holloway is? Sarah asked. It's a diversified portfolio, Christopher said, confused. A holding company bought 51% of the shares last year during the liquidity crisis. Blue Horizon Ventures. Blue Horizon, Sarah nodded. My favorite color, and the name of the street where that shelter was. The one I lived in after you kicked me out. Christopher's face went grey. No. Yes, Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I own 51% of your company, Chris. I am your boss. I have been for a year. I've been approving your bonuses. I've been reading your emails. I've been watching you claim credit for my team's logistical algorithms. She swiped the screen, and I've been waiting for the right moment to conduct a performance review. Beatrice stepped away from Christopher as if he were contagious. You work for her, she hissed. You said you ran the company. I do. I did, Christopher stammered. He looked at Sarah, desperation clawing at his throat. Sarah, please. Let's not do this here. Let's go inside. We can talk. For the kids' sake. For the kids' sake? Sarah repeated. Her voice finally broke, cracking with the weight of 5 years of pain. Where were you when Austin had pneumonia and I couldn't afford the heating bill? Where were you when Connor asked why he didn't have a daddy like the other boys? You were buying watches and courting heiresses. She looked at the triplets. They were watching her, wide-eyed. They had never seen their mother this intense. She took a deep breath and composed herself. She had to be strong for them. I'm not here to talk, Christopher. I'm here to fire you. The crowd went dead silent. You can't, Christopher whispered. The board. I am the board, Sarah said coldly. You are terminated, effective immediately, for embezzlement of company funds to pay for. What was it? Personal entertainment? She glanced at Beatrice. And for gross incompetence. You've been driving the company into the ground, Chris. I only kept it afloat to save the employees' jobs. But I'm done carrying you, just like you were done carrying me. Christopher fell to his knees. It wasn't a theatrical gesture. His legs simply gave out. His career, his marriage, his reputation, all incinerated in under 10 minutes. Beatrice looked down at him. The calculations in her head were finished. A husband with no job, a publicly humiliated ex-wife who was richer than God, and a scandal that would ruin her social standing if she stayed attached to him. She ripped her veil off. I can't believe this, Beatrice spat. She threw her bouquet at Christopher. You're a fraud. My father warned me you were all smoke and mirrors. She turned to her parents. Daddy, get the car, we're leaving. Bea, wait, Christopher yelled, reaching for her dress. Don't touch me, she screamed, kicking his hand away. We're done. The Vanderkamp family, sensing the sinking ship, began to herd their daughter toward the exit. The guests began to murmur, rising from their seats. The show was over, or rather, the main event had just concluded. But Sarah wasn't done. She looked at the kneeling man, the father of her children, the man she had once adored. She felt no love, but she was surprised to find she felt no hate anymore either. Just pity. He looked so small. You wanted to shame me, Chris, Sarah said softly. But you didn't need my help. You do a perfectly good job of shaming yourself. She turned to the triplets. Come on, let's go get some ice cream. This party is boring. Wait. It wasn't Christopher. It was Greg. The best man. He stepped forward, looking at Sarah with a mixture of awe and calculation. "Miss Mitchell," he said, smoothing his tie, I just want to say, I had no idea. Chris told us a very different story. If there's anything the firm needs, I'm a broker at Goldman, and—" Sarah cut him off with a withering look. "Save it, Greg. You laughed at his jokes for 5 years. You're just as complicit." She turned on her heel, her velvet dress swirling around her. The triplets fell in line, holding hands. However, as she walked back toward the Rolls-Royce, Christopher scrambled to his feet. Desperation had turned into anger. "You can't just leave," he shouted, his face red and veins bulging. "Those are my kids. I have rights. I'll sue you. I'll take half of everything. We were married when you had the idea for that software. That's marital property." Sarah stopped. She didn't turn around. She just paused. Kyle, the bodyguard, tensed, his hand going to his holster. Sarah raised a hand to stop him. She turned slowly. "Marital property?" she asked. "Yes," Christopher yelled, sensing a lifeline. "You developed the code while we were married. I'm entitled to it. I'll drag you through court for years, Sarah. I'll take the kids. I'll take the company." Sarah smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said. "Roberts, bring the file." From the second SUV, a man in a sharp grey suit stepped out. He carried a thick leather briefcase. He was Sarah's chief legal counsel, a man known in New York as the Grim Reaper. He walked up and handed Sarah a blue folder. "Do you remember the divorce papers, Chris?" Sarah asked, tapping the folder against her palm. "The ones you had your lawyer draft. The ones you forced me to sign while I was packing my bags." "Yeah. So what?" "You were so worried I would come after your family money," Sarah explained, her voice projecting to the fascinated crowd. "You inserted a draconian total separation of assets clause. It stated that any and all assets, ideas, debts or ventures, created or acquired by either party, past, present or future, were solely the property of the individual. You wanted to protect your trust fund from the waitress." She opened the folder and held up the document, Christopher's signature bold at the bottom. "You signed away your rights to my brain, Chris. In your haste to protect your pennies, you walked away from my billions." She dropped the folder on the grass next to the crumpled invitation. "My lawyers will send you a copy. I'd suggest you read it, right after you file for unemployment." The sun began to set over the Harrington estate, casting long, bruised, purple shadows across the lawn. The guests were gone. The orchestra had packed up hours ago. The catering staff was quietly clearing away plates of untouched lobster and filet mignon, their eyes darting nervously toward the man sitting alone on the stone steps of the altar. Christopher Smith sat with his head in his hands. His tuxedo jacket was thrown on the grass, stained with dirt. His tie was undone. He was technically trespassing on his ex-wife's property, but the security team, Sarah's team, had been instructed to let him sit there for a while. It was a part of the punishment, to let him soak in the silence of his failure. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He didn't check it, but he knew what it was. Social media. One of the influencers, a girl named Tiffany, who Christopher had only invited because she had 2 million followers, had live-streamed the entire thing. The video was already trending on X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. The hashtags were brutal. "The Wedding Crasher Queen," "Seth Smith, Takedown," "Shakama Wears Velvet." He finally pulled his phone out. A notification from Business Insider popped up. "Breaking. Smith Holloway stock dips amidst leadership scandal. VP Christopher Smith ousted by majority shareholder ex-wife. He swiped it away. Then a text from his landlord. Well, the company housing manager. Mr. Smith, per the directive from the board, you are required to vacate the penthouse by 12 p.m. tomorrow. Your access key cards will be deactivated. Please leave the company vehicle in the garage. It's not fair, Christopher muttered to the empty chairs. I built this life. You built nothing. Christopher looked up. It was his father, Richard Smith. The older man looked aged, his face grey. He was leaning on a cane, standing by the edge of the aisle. Dad, Christopher said, standing up on shaky legs. Dad, you have to help me. She's crazy. She's trying to ruin us. You need to call the lawyers. We can fight the dismissal. Richard shook his head slowly. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only the cold pragmatism of a man who loved money more than his son. There is no us, Christopher. I just got off the phone with the board. Sarah, Ms. Mitchell, has provided them with a dossier. 5 years of expense reports. You charged vacations to the Caymans as client acquisition. You bought that watch on your wrist with the R&D budget. Everyone does it, Christopher argued. It's how business works. Not when the majority shareholder is the woman you left to freeze in a shelter, Richard spat. You were careless, you were arrogant, and you have cost this family its legacy. Richard turned to walk away. Where are you going? Christopher cried out. I need a place to stay. They're kicking me out of the apartment. I suggest you try a motel, Richard said without looking back. The manor is closed to you. Your mother is distraught. We can't afford the association with you right now. Not until the stock stabilizes. Christopher watched his father limp away to his sedan. For the first time in his life, Christopher Smith was truly, completely alone. Meanwhile, 5 miles away at the Ritz-Carlton, the atmosphere was very different. The presidential suite was filled with the sound of cartoons and room service carts. Austin and Connor were building a fort out of pillows, while Bella sat on Sarah's lap, eating a strawberry. "Mommy," Bella asked, wiping red juice from her chin. Was that man really our daddy? Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, her heart aching. She had prepared for this conversation, but it didn't make it any easier. "Yes, baby, that was him." "He looked mad," Austin piped up from the pillow fort. "And he yelled. He was just confused," Sarah said carefully. She would never poison them against him, even if he deserved it. They would learn the truth on their own time. He made some bad choices a long time ago, and today he had to face them. "I don't like him," Connor said decisively, throwing a pillow. "I like Kyle better. Kyle plays soccer with us." Sarah looked up at Kyle, who was standing by the door, keeping watch. The stoic bodyguard offered a rare, faint smile. "We don't have to see him if we don't want to," Sarah promised. "We're going to stay here for a few days, explore the city, and then we're going home." "To the big house?" Bella asked. "To the big house," Sarah confirmed. Later that night, after the triplets had fallen asleep in the massive king-sized bed, Sarah walked out onto the balcony. The city lights of Greenwich twinkled below. She held a glass of wine, but her hand was trembling slightly. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, leaving a hollow exhaustion. She had won. She had decimated him. But it didn't undo the nights she had cried herself to sleep on a cot in the shelter. It didn't undo the fear of those first few months, wondering if she could afford diapers. Her phone rang. It was her lawyer, Roberts. "Sarah," Roberts said, his voice grave. "I thought you should know. Beatrice Vanderkamp gave a statement to page 6. "Let me guess," Sarah sighed. "She's playing the victim?" "Worse, she's distancing herself completely. She claims she was deceived by Christopher and is looking into annulment options for the engagement, but she also took a swipe at you. She called the interruption a classless display of new money, and hinted that the children were props. Sarah gripped the railing. She can say whatever she wants about me. But if she mentions my children again, I will buy her father's oil company and dismantle it pipe by pipe. I've already sent a cease and desist, Roberts assured her. But there's something else. Christopher has been calling the office. Repeatedly. What does he want? He wants a meeting. He says he wants to discuss co-parenting arrangements. But Sarah, he sounds unstable. He's insisting that he has rights. Sarah looked back through the glass doors at her sleeping children. He waived his rights when he signed those papers 5 years ago, Sarah said, her voice turning to ice. But if he wants a meeting, let's give him one. Not a co-parenting meeting, a deposition. 3 weeks after the wedding catastrophe, Christopher Smith was a shell of his former self. He was no longer living in a penthouse. He was rotting in a mildew-scented motel room in Queens, the kind where the neon sign outside flickered with a depressing buzz. He sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, staring at a corkboard covered in telephoto pictures of Sarah and the triplets, photos he had bought with the last of his pawned watch money. His assets were frozen, his reputation incinerated, and his friends had blocked his number. She stole my life, he whispered, his voice rasped from days of silence. In his twisted mind, the narrative had shifted. Sarah wasn't the victim. She was the thief. And the children? They weren't just his offspring. They were his leverage. If he could get physical custody, even for a day, the courts would have to listen. He could demand a settlement. He could demand his life back. He grabbed his coat. He knew their schedule. The private investigator had done his job before, quitting due to lack of payment. The Dalton School. Upper East Side. 3:08 p.m. It was a biting Tuesday afternoon. Christopher stood across the street from the prestigious school, blending into the crowd of chauffeurs and nannies. He looked manic, unshaven, and desperate. At 3:00 p.m., the doors opened. A sea of children in navy blazers poured out. Christopher's heart hammered. Then he saw them. Austin, Connor, and Bella walked out, laughing, trailing a few feet ahead of Cale, the massive bodyguard. Christopher didn't think. He surged across the street, dodging a honking taxi. "Austin! Connor! Bella!" he shouted, throwing his arms wide. The triplets froze. They didn't recognize the disheveled man rushing towards them. "Daddy's here!" Christopher yelled, forcing a terrifying smile. He dropped to one knee on the sidewalk. "Come here! Give Daddy a hug!" Bella screamed, backing away behind her brothers. "No! Go away! It's me!" Christopher lunged, grabbing Connor's sleeve. "We're going to get ice cream! Come on!" "Step back!" Kyle was there instantly. He didn't argue. He acted. As Christopher tried to pull Connor, Kyle grabbed Christopher's wrist and twisted. He swept Christopher's legs, slamming him face-first onto the concrete. "Let me go!" Christopher shrieked, pinned under Kyle's knee. "Help! Police! This man is assaulting a father!" A crowd gathered, phones recording. But they didn't see a father. They saw a stalker. Within moments, sirens wailed. Sarah's armored SUV screeched to the curb. She leaped out, terror etched on her face until she saw the triplets, safe behind Cale. She rushed to them, hugging them fiercely, checking for injuries. Then she turned to Christopher, who was being hauled up by arriving police officers. "Sarah," Christopher begged, bleeding from his lip. "I just wanted to see them. I have rights. I love them." Sarah walked up to him, her eyes cold as ice. "You don't love them," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You don't even know them. You don't know Bella is allergic to strawberries. You don't know Austin is afraid of thunder. You didn't come here to be a father, Christopher. You came here because you are broke, and you need a hostage." "I'm sorry," he wept as the cuffs clicked. "Don't let them take me to jail." "You did this to yourself," Sarah said, turning her back on him to shield her children. As the police cruiser took him away, Christopher watched his family drive off in a luxury convoy. Despair washed over him, but as they booked him into Central Holding, a dark thought took root. He was going to Rikers Island, and he remembered a name his former cellmate had whispered, a man on the inside who hated the Mitchell family as much as he did. The war wasn't over. It was just moving to the underworld. Rikers Island isn't a place for men like Christopher Smith. Without his suits, without his scotch, and without his title, he was just another inmate in a jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and despair. Christopher sat in the corner of the recreation yard, nursing his bruised face. He had been denied bail. The charges were stacking up. Attempted kidnapping, violation of a restraining order, and now, thanks to Sarah's auditors, federal embezzlement charges. He was looking at 15 years. "You look like a man who lost a bet with the devil," a voice rasped. Christopher looked up. Sitting on the bench next to him was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He had a spiderweb tattoo on his neck and eyes that were completely dead. His name was Russo. He was Mob. "My wife," Christopher spat. She ruined me. She has everything. The money, the company, the kids." Russo chuckled darkly. "Money comes and goes, kid. But respect is forever. You let a woman disrespect you like that? In my world, we don't allow that." Christopher looked at him, intrigued. "What would you do?" "If someone takes from you," Russo leaned in, his voice a whisper. "You take from them. You don't take the kids. Too messy. You take the sauce. You cut the head off the snake." Christopher felt a cold shiver, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. "I have no money to pay you." "I don't want money," Russo said. "I want inside info. I hear you used to run Smith Holloway. My organization, we have some shipping interests. We need a back door into their logistics software, Logiflow. You give me the admin codes to bypass the customs filter, and I'll handle your wife." Christopher hesitated. Sarah had written that code. It was her masterpiece. Giving the mob access to it would destroy the company's integrity. It would ruin everything she built. "Done," Christopher whispered. 2 days later, Sarah was working late in her home office. The triplets were asleep. The house was quiet, save for the rain. Suddenly, her computer screen flickered. A red warning box popped up. "Unauthorized access attempt. Admin level 1. Sarah frowned. She typed rapidly, tracing the IP. It was coming from a correctional facility proxy? Her heart stopped. She knew Christopher's passwords. She knew his coding style. Lazy, predictable. He was trying to use his old credentials, which meant someone was feeding him a device, or he was feeding someone else the keys. She didn't call the police. She called Cale. "We have a breach," she said. "And I think I know what's coming next." An hour later, the power to the estate was cut. The mansion plunged into darkness. Sarah moved immediately. She didn't scream. She went to the panic room, a hidden bookshelf in the library that opened into a reinforced steel bunker. She woke the triplets gently. "We're playing a game," she whispered to them. "Hide and seek. Stay in here with Nanny Margaret. Do not open the door unless you hear my voice and the secret password." "What's the password?" Austin asked, rubbing his eyes. "Blue Horizon." She kissed them. She locked them in. Then, she didn't hide. She walked back into the dark living room. She sat on the couch, facing the French doors. She placed a handgun on the coffee table. She had learned how to use it 3 years ago. The glass shattered. 2 men entered, dressed in black, wearing ski masks. They moved with professional silence. "Ms. Mitchell," one of them said, spotting her silhouette. "We're not here to hurt the kids, just you. A message from an old friend." "Let me guess," Sarah said, her voice steady in the dark. "Christopher traded my software for a hit. How unoriginal." The man raised his gun. "Goodbye, lady." Bang! The gunshot was deafening. But Sarah didn't fall. The man in the mask dropped, clutching his leg. The second man spun around, but a red laser dot was already dancing on his chest. Kyle stepped out of the shadows of the hallway. Behind him were 3 other members of Sarah's security team, armed with assault rifles. "You boys picked the wrong house," Kyle said calmly. The lights flickered back on. Sarah hadn't cut the power. She had cut it to lure them in. She had baited the trap. Sarah stood up and walked over to the man writhing on the floor. She kicked his gun away. "Who sent you?" she asked, though she knew. "Russo," the man groaned. "Russo, from Rikers." Sarah nodded. She picked up her phone and dialed the district attorney directly. "D.A. Miller," she said. "I have 2 intruders in custody, and I have evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder for hire involving an inmate currently in your custody, Christopher Smith. I think it's time we discuss a life sentence without parole." 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. Christopher Smith sat at the defense table, looking like a skeleton. He had aged 20 years. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, he didn't even cry. He just stared at the table. He was going to a supermax prison. He would never see the sky without bars again. Sarah wasn't there to see it. She didn't need to be. She was on a yacht in the Mediterranean. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and violet. Austin, Connor, and Bella were jumping off the diving board, shrieking with joy. "Mom, look at me!" Bella yelled, doing a cannonball. Sarah laughed, clapping her hands. She adjusted her sunglasses and leaned back on the lounge chair. She picked up her tablet. A notification from the stock exchange. Mitchell Holdings acquires Vanderkamp Oil. She smiled. Beatrice's family had gone bankrupt trying to cover up the scandal, and Sarah had bought them out for pennies on the dollar. She was going to turn their oil rigs into wind farms. She put the tablet down. She looked at her children. They were happy. They were safe. They were loved. Christopher had wanted to shame her. He had wanted to show her that she was nothing without him. Instead, he had given her the fire to become everything he could never be. Sarah Mitchell closed her eyes and listened to the ocean. The best revenge wasn't prison. It wasn't money. It was this. It was peace. And that is how Sarah Mitchell turned an invitation of shame into a declaration of victory. She proved that when someone tries to bury you, sometimes they're just planting a seed. Christopher Smith lost everything because he underestimated the heart of a mother and the brilliance of a woman scorned. What do you think? Did Christopher deserve his fate? Or was Sarah too ruthless in the end? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and remember, success is the best revenge.